You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to reclaim, reconnect, and refocus their life by bringing you the top real estate professionals in the industry. We'll help you diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Simonillo. Hey guys, it's a great day to be a real estate investor. It's always a good day to be a real estate investor because there's always something to learn. And the depth of knowledge is endless. That's one of the things I love about this industry is no deal is the same. There's always a new angle, always something that you can learn from somebody else and kind of hone your craft. So we're very excited. I'm excited for today's episode. And, usually we do some introductory stuff, but I really want to jump straight in because this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I know Seth's as well, is real estate's great. It's a business model, and there's lots of ways, to build wealth and cash flow and to find financial freedom, time freedom. But at the end of the day, we all have a nagging question that we have to answer in our lives, and it's why. What's our why? What's our purpose? And we'll just get right into it. So Tyler Goble is our guest today. Tyler, how you doing?
Man, I'm wonderful. How are y'all doing?
Good. It's good to have you.
So you said y'all, but you live in Washington, D.C. Help us reconcile those two things.
Man, I'm like a mixed match of a bunch of different regions. My wife's from Texas. I'm from Michigan. Went to school in Maryland. Lived in North Carolina for 3 years. Lived in California for 2. Now I'm in D.C. And so that's a product of a lot of different stuff. But yeah, I don't know what my vernacular is nowadays.
Well, I have some buddies that have moved to Texas, and they're from Ohio, right, which is like the middle of the road accent, verbiage for the whole country. And I noticed pretty quickly that Texas has a very strong culture as a state, and it's a little weird. It's kind of like a cult. And so then they started, well, that's what everybody from Texas says. So they're texting me and they're like, hey, I can't wait till y'all come down here. And I'm like, when did you start? You don't talk this way. Like, when did you start saying this
My
stuff?
sister Samantha, when she moved to Texas, she did the same thing.
It's weird.
It was instant.
And so now by principle, I will not say that, although there is a temptation there. But no, so little context for our listeners here. Seth and I were like, man, we need to find some good quality guests on the next kind of round of our Reinvest podcast. And so we were scheduling people. I was scouring LinkedIn, and your profile really stood out to me because one of the things on your profile that you've advertised is that you're using real estate and data science in order to fight human trafficking. And, I don't know if this has been your experience, but when you're in real estate, the conversation typically surrounds a deal, a property, numbers, money, profit, loss, right? It's all of those things because it's a very money-driven, wealth-driven industry, which I love that. It's great that we live in a country that promotes that and that you're able to build that financial wealth and success. But it's easy to kind of get derailed along the way or to lose your focus. And so to see somebody advertise something like that, obviously you have a passion associated with it. And so I reached out, you were very gracious to, reciprocate that. And here we are. So just give us a little context, to who you are, how you got into real estate, and how does human trafficking tie into what you and your wife are doing?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's definitely something I think that's kind of like an attention grabber as far as like a LinkedIn headline goes, but we do have some pretty deep personal roots with it. And so kind of going back to even how we got involved in real estate in general and kind of giving you guys the whole soup to nuts of how LTG got started, like what it looks like now, kind of what it looked like in the beginning. First of all, I went to the Naval Academy, so I'm actually active duty Marine Corps officer right now still. And
Wow.
so what that looked like was basically going into the Marine Corps, not knowing what I wanted to do, becoming an infantry officer.
Did you do that out of high school?
No, so the Naval Academy is a college, and
Okay.
so it's a 4-year university in Maryland. And I went there to play football, so it's a Division I football program. And so getting to play teams like Notre Dame, Ohio State, the Army Navy game every year.
Yeah, so you would play in the Army Navy game.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, one of my some of my best memories are beating those guys. We went 7 for 8. For the listeners out there, last couple of years for Navy football haven't been that great as far as the wins and loss column. But when we were there,
When you were
2012
there.
through
Yeah.
15, back in my day,
Yeah.
we went 7 for 8. So
Wow.
had a lot of fun, made a ton of really, really good friends. And when I went there, I told my mom, because when you go there, you commission into the Navy or the Marine Corps. So you're going to serve in the military for 5 years at a minimum. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, "There's no way I would join the Marine Corps. First of all, I'll go on a boat. I'll sit out there for 5 years. No big deal." And sure enough, I got there and I was like, "Man, I do not want to sit on a boat. This would be terrible." And so went to the Marine Corps option, Marine Corps ground contract, and I said, "There's no way I would do something so dumb like the infantry. I'll do something that has like quote unquote skills that transfer." Sure enough, I was like, "I can't do anything other than the infantry. Those are my people." Um, and so that's where the path I went down. And the way that the Marine Corps works is you get your job. So I commissioned into the Marine Corps as a ground officer, went to infantry officer course, and then after that, you spend about 3 or 4 years working in that job before they give you basically it's called a B billet, and what that looks like is like a job where you can kind of take a little bit of a break. So
Mm,
like as an infantry
mm.
officer, you're working 12 to 16-hour days very, very consistently.
Wow.
You're basically not sleeping in your house most of the time. You're out training or you're deploying and you're doing those kinds of things. And that is not a time to start a side hustle. So like all
Right.
those people out there that are like in jobs that are super high tempo, like you should have a life. And if you're working 12 to 16 hours a week and you're really in charge of people, because at that time I was in charge of about 50 people all the way up to about 150 people that were like
Wow.
direct reporting to
Wow.
me for those kinds of things. And kind of an important job, right? Kind of people's lives in the balance there. And so doing a good job at that was really important to me.
Were you married at
But
this time?
no, I was not. But I got introduced to my wife kind of at the very beginning of that 3 year period
Mm-hmm.
ish. And so that's a great segue. My wife came into the picture where basically I was getting towards the end of that tour, had about a year left, and I had bought a house when I moved down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And one of the things that you can do, like this was prior to like Bigger Pockets coining like the house hacking term and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But I bought the house. I filled it with four of my buddies. They rented a room for me. Um, I didn't need to pay a mortgage. That was pretty cool. But after meeting my wife, she didn't want to live in a frat house with five, like 22 to like
Makes
26 year
sense.
olds.
I can't tell you how many people have had that conversation before with their spouse.
Oh yeah, it was yeah. I mean, she would like come visit because she lived in Texas. She would come visit and be like, "You guys are animals." Like, and for full disclosure, it's like we're all infantry officers in this one house, all
Yeah.
going to the field, coming back smelling horrible, and like
Right.
using the same laundry machines. And so, um, God bless
So it
Linz
was
for,
justified, her
oh
criticism.
yeah,
Yeah.
big time, big time. And so I bought another house to move into once we got engaged. And that was like a hurricane damage. I don't know if you guys remember Hurricane Florence back in like
Mm.
2018 or so. It came up the East
Mm.
Coast and it wrecked a ton of houses. And we picked up one of those houses on a Vendee financing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
No, what is that?
Yeah, pretty cool program that they recently, I think in the last 5 years, revitalized. But basically, anyone can take over a property under the same terms as a VA loan.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's a VA foreclosure, but even if you never served, you
Assumable.
can get the same terms,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so,
Actually, I've seen a couple of those advertised. I didn't realize that's what the term was, though, for it.
yeah, it
Mm.
sounds like vendor. It kind of is like misleading, I feel like. But we saw that house. We bought it. It was like five minutes down the street from the first house I bought. And when I say that that house was a project, I mean it had almost nothing in it.
Mm.
Had no insulation, had no electrical. Floors were completely jacked up. And so that was our first real like buying something that needed a whole lot of work. And so fast forward about like we got under contract right before I left on deployment, got back from that deployment and had like a month to just rehab this house. We were like under contract throughout the whole deployment. Actually bought that house from Japan, like doing sign language with the mobile notary to like because he didn't speak English, but he was in
Whoa.
Japan. Um, that's a whole long story. probably for another podcast. But bottom line is we got into that first house, got to do all the different trades on it, got to do electrical, plumbing, put floors in, painters, new roof, new HVAC. Pretty much all the stuff that you would do in a single family home, we did hands-on with that one house.
Right.
My wife, then fiance, got to design everything and really like found that she had a gifting as well as just enjoyed the design process. And so we moved into that house, lived in it for about a year, and then kind of rewinding to getting that first like take a knee, be billet job. I got orders out to Monterey, California to go get a master's degree in operations research. And that's like data science, like AI, machine learning, all that kind of stuff. But the Marine Corps was sending me out there to grad school to basically get that degree and then use it inside the Marine Corps. And so we accepted those orders. And like I've always been of the mindset, like I wanted to buy stuff. I didn't want to rent if I didn't absolutely have to.
Right.
And we got under contract on a house out in Monterey. And this is like 2020, so like right before
things
like
were bonkers.
December. Yeah, December 2019, January 2019. We got under contract on a new construction out there. And I mean, I'm the smartest person alive. Predicted the pandemic, knew that was going to happen, new construction in California. And so we really hit a home run with that single family home.
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick.
Go ahead.
Can you give us some parameters as to what a home run is?
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting right now after owning it for.
You still own it?
Yeah, we still own it. Yeah,
okay.
It's a long-term rental that truly cash flows $1,300 a month.
Wow.
In California.
In California.
Did you sell your property
tons of equity
in North Carolina, one of your properties, to buy this house in California?
Exactly. And so, which is perfect because that's really why we started a business is after selling these last two. So we sold the two houses in California in order to be able to purchase the one in, or the two houses in North Carolina in order to purchase the ones in California. And like you guys know, like flipping houses or selling single family homes, you oftentimes get like a large inflow of cash.
Mm-hmm.
And we're newly married, like trying to figure out how are we going to decide to like give money and be generous with stuff. Tithing for us, like we're Christians. And so like tithing off of my Marine Corps paycheck was super easy. It's just auto deduct 10%. We know what that number is going to be. But like if you get like 50 grand deposited in your account, like how do you decide like where that money's going to go? Right. All those kinds of things. And newly married, and I'm kind of a bull in a china closet. Just like, I don't know, let's do stuff. And trying to be a good husband, trying to figure out how that works. And I was talking with Lindsay about it, and we were just like, where do we want to give this kind of money to? Like, what's the thing that would be like worthwhile? It doesn't feel like we need to just give it to a church, like a lump sum like that.
Right.
Maybe we look at a nonprofit that is doing some good stuff. And her mother runs Unbound Now, which is an anti-human trafficking nonprofit. She's the founder. And I didn't know if Susan was doing this thing out of her garage on like a laptop and like sending out a MailChimp newsletter or like what this looked like. We had just gotten married. I knew that it was a thing, but it's like a multinational organization. Like they're in a bunch of different countries. Like the state of Louisiana came to them to stand up their whole anti-trafficking organization and infrastructure. Like at the recording of this podcast, they've helped like over, I want to say 1,000 people this year alone.
Wow.
That's
stateside or like across multi-nations, like just everywhere?
Multi-nations. And that's just like the actual like survivors recovered. That's nothing to do with like stings of like networks and stuff like that, which is a lot more than 1,000 people getting impacted. I didn't know any of this. I was just like, okay, sure, we'll give it to your mom's thing. Like
your mom's thing.
Like good husband.
Yeah,
like,
grease the wheels with the new wife.
That's
for
right,
sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Every husband's like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. It could be a con, but it would still be the right decision.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And so we did that, but then Susan called me and she was like, Tyler, just so you understand, like for $5,000, we're able to employ somebody for like an entire year in a country like Mongolia, or one of those like developing nations.
Yeah, that's true.
And all they do is fight trafficking on the borders. And Mongolia in particular is right on the northern border. Little geography lesson. It's on the northern border of China. And what happens if you guys are interested in like the trafficking stuff, Naomi Park, she's been on like Jordan Peterson's podcast, she's been on Rogan.
Okay.
And she was a North Korean refugee. But what happens to a lot of North Koreans and other people in kind of vulnerable positions is they'll get into Mongolia and then sold into slavery through Mongolia into China. And it's
Wow.
like, I'm in the Marine Corps, I'm an infantry officer. I was in the South Pacific, kind of understanding these different dynamics. And when she said that to me, I was like, oh my God, like $5,000, like even if you saved one person with $5,000, like
It would be
Right.
worth
a person's
it, right?
life is worth way more than $5,000.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm like a spreadsheet nerd, like got sent to go get a data science master's degree, and I started kind of modeling it out. And I was like, man, we flipped one house basically not on accident, but like not super intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the result. Like, what would it look like if we flipped like a house a year and just donated money from that? And then my systems brain was like, man, one house a year, that's a lot of work to just do it once. Like, you might as well do two. It's like, well, you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for milk. And I was like, well, why don't we just make this a legitimate business? And I'm getting my master's degree. I've got more time than I usually do. This gave us the opportunity to kind of set up systems and figure out what that would look like. And so that's kind of what we did. We threw the throttle in for 2 years. We flipped around 20 or so houses.
Wow.
Oh wow. Where were you flipping? Were you flipping in California?
We were flipping in Texas, actually. So we were flipping in Waco, but all from California.
While you were living in California.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Waco.
So
Who did we just have on the podcast that was from Waco?
Mm.
Travis Bacum.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
He was from maybe a city right outside of Waco, Texas, or something like that. Interesting.
Is that where Magnolia is?
it is. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you guys identified that as kind of an emerging market.
So going back to like the data stuff, like all the demographic stuff for Waco at that time were just phenomenal. Like you had the squeeze from Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin,
Yeah.
and like the affordability was like moving into Waco.
Right.
And so identified it as a good market. It's also where we had like family. So Lindsay's from Waco.
Oh, okay.
And so we had people on the ground that we could trust in that market. It was more affordable, but then also Unbound was headquartered there.
Oh,
And
wow.
so there was just a bunch of really good synergies from across a bunch of different things,
Yeah.
which allowed us to, I think, have a not really an unfair advantage, but enough of an advantage to kind of break into it and start doing some stuff there.
So going from not flipping any houses to flipping 20 in 2 years. So how did you even find your deals? I mean, because I think that's where everybody's at right now. I know the market's a little bit different now than when you were maybe flipping in the last couple of years. But everyone's always kind of like, how do you find good deals? So what were you guys doing that was working?
Yeah, we didn't do any marketing. I would go find people that were finding deals. So I was finding the folks that were doing the marketing, and being a serious buyer helped a lot. So I spent the first probably 6 months telling people that this is what we were going to do and hadn't bought a single house yet. It was just a lot of like living
Casting
on the West
vision
Coast.
and yeah.
Yeah, casting vision, showing people what the plan was, and being serious about stuff. And pretty much once we bought our first couple, that's when it was like, okay, now we have some case studies. We raised
Right.
money for all of our stuff. We did private money along with a local bank. And so we didn't do any kind of hard money lending. It was all like relationship stuff that happened from that 6 month buildup of like just talking to people and kind of
Did you
explaining
tell
what we were gonna
them?
do.
Yeah, like when you say explaining, did you say, "Hey, we're going to come in and we're going to flip houses," or did you kind of insinuate how that was tied to kind of a bigger picture?
We talked about the anti-trafficking stuff for sure. And it was, I think a lot of people have really good ideas, but people don't actually execute on it.
Right.
And I think a lot of times it was coming from like a good, like my background in general, I guess. So I had a good network, and it's hard to get moving though until you break the ice, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah,
And so
because
we had-
people say, "Yeah, that sounds good," and we'll wait and see. There's a lot of people that are like, "We'll wait and
Yeah.
see," because
Yeah.
how many times have you heard somebody come in hot and heavy with a new idea, right? And at some
Hmm.
point, it kind of conditions you to say, I'm going to hold back and see if this person really is going to follow through on what they say.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And we gave away equity for sure. Like we partnered with people that were in that local market
Mm.
and would split deals 50-50 to kind of mitigate the risk.
Mm-hmm.
In our brains, it was like we would rather partner with really good people and split our profits as long as we kind of had an agreement in place that we are going to tithe off of that income towards
Right.
Unbound, then we were good. And so for us, it was like I would rather make our partners a ton of money so long as their incentives are aligned with the charity stuff, as well as the people that invested with us. And so the folks that would invest with us, it's like we didn't mandate that anyone gave money to anything. But I know that if I made um, like John Doe a bunch of money as a private lender, I know he's going to do good stuff with that money. And so those are the kinds of people we would have conversations with and get
Yeah.
advice
Mm-hmm.
with, um, and that kind of stuff.
So what was the outcome? Okay, you did 20 houses in those 2 years. What was the outcome to Unbound? Were you able to accomplish some of the financial goals of giving that you had? And then how did that change your strategy in real estate?
Yeah, so I wish we could have gave way more money. We gave a good amount. We gave more than our 10%, which is great off of our profits there. Um, it's hard to really quantify in my mind, like what kind of impact our own business had, but we were, because of that experience, and that kind of leads us into where we're at today. The real estate stuff has really transformed in like data science and consulting. And
Mm.
because of the street cred and the stuff that we had done inside of the single family world, I was able to basically be the data scientist for like a startup called Better Life, which is like a real estate education platform. In
Like
this past year,
Better Life with Brandon Turner?
hmm yep,
Oh, wow. Awesome.
yeah, and
Very
so
cool.
we were able to give 500 grand last year to anti-trafficking work, which was awesome.
Because
So in
the
the
whole
first year of
Better
its
Life
inception.
tribe, that's what they're doing. All their proceeds are fighting human trafficking. Or, they're giving away a lot of money to that from the people that are involved in the tribe and stuff like that. Is it the same ministry or are they doing different ministries?
So we gave to the Tim Tebow Foundation this past
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
But then there was also a carve out for Unbound as well, which was awesome. And
Awesome.
so I think that they pretty much were able to give about the same amount from our 20 houses in that 1 year to Unbound, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
dollars wise. But
Yeah.
um, it all works together for a
Yeah.
lot of different
For
stuff,
sure.
man. And so it was like one of those things where flipping houses for us was kind of like the gateway drug into like figuring out how do you run a business and how do you
Mm.
work with other people's money and on a shorter timeline because we're
Right.
so young that we didn't want to get ourselves involved in syndicating because those are maybe 5 to 7 year holds at times.
Right.
We didn't feel like we had enough time to really um, invest into that kind of a space. But with flipping houses, you're in and out hopefully in about 6 to 8 months on each
Right.
deal, and you get to work with a broad spectrum of folks. And so um, that was our kind of initial stage of our business was flipping homes, and like the cash flow, like I said, it was a home run. It's a home run for us. Our house in Monterey, that's making 1,300 free cash flows a month.
Right.
Um, but one flip is a bigger tithe than that every year. And so the business model to be able to give bigger amounts was flipping, and then that's kind of since progressed into like businesses in general. If that makes sense.
So you're
So
transitioning out of the flipping at this point, and you're saying you're focusing on wanting to identify businesses to purchase and kind of have part of that business fund that ongoing. Is that what I'm hearing you explain?
so basically, it's like real estate's always been our first love, and so we'll always have some portion of real estate in our own personal portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, it's slow for the most part. And what really gets me excited is helping to build businesses with good people. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's turned more into we have a offshore talent agency now that is hiring folks for CEOs. A large portion of our business has been really enabled by virtual assistants in the
Oh,
Philippines.
yeah.
And so that's a super cool opportunity, I think, for one, the people in those countries that have a great job,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
unbelievable job for them,
Yep.
making way more money than they would in any normal job inside the Philippines.
Which is
But two,
wild that is, it's like you're checking a box for them and giving them an opportunity they may not otherwise have, while simultaneously being cost effective from a work capacity perspective in the stateside portion of things.
Yeah.
So it really
Oh, yeah.
is a win-win scenario. And I love that it's that way.
oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like those opportunities, like I don't know if I'll really hire true employees in the US until we get to a really big stage. Um, or if I'll even really need to. Like my first assistant, Christine, and she got brought on when we started buying houses a lot faster. Um, she's a partner in that LTG assist business. Like she's
Cool.
a legit
Yeah.
partner, which for her, it's like that's a radically different lifestyle than she would be able to have.
Hold on. Let's just this is pretty radical. Okay, this concept. So, Christine lives in the Philippines.
Yep.
You kind of approached her as a virtual assistant in your company, and you've now moved her into an equity partner in LTG Investments.
So we have a vertical inside of LTG called LTG Assist. And what we do is work with small and medium-sized businesses to hire offshore talent for their business. And so, like, for example, for you guys, like we've hired for like investor relations folks. And so people that live in the Philippines, but they had experience with Standard & Poor's, they've been doing investor subscription agreements, they've been working for other private equity firms or like capital managers in the Pacific. They just happen to live in the Philippines. And it's like those folks are so much more effective, but so much more cost effective, but at the same time, incredibly talented.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the way we've divided that specific vertical up is basically Christine handles everything on the Filipino side. I handle everything on the American side. We charge a one-time sourcing fee. She gets 50% of that. I get the other 50%. And then she has some like courses that she sells inside of the business, and I have some SaaS. And it's just like a true insane win-win for
Yeah.
everybody, you know? And
Wow.
she's done such an awesome job, like building out the scaffolding, because it was her idea originally. The reason we came up with the idea was we brought another full-time developer on staff and used the same headhunting agency that found Christine for us. And after we hired Tina, Christine was like, Tyler, we need to just do this. And I was like, I don't know. Like you guys can probably tell, like I'm like super fragmented sometimes, it feels like we're doing a lot of different things.
Right.
And real estate is just kind of a piece of that. And I was like, Christine, I don't know if I should do a whole nother thing. Like maybe that's not a good idea for us. Also, like, how does that change the dynamic between
Right.
Christine
Right.
and us? Like, am I putting her in a weird position? Um, like those were the kinds of thoughts I was going through. But we kind of test piloted it and thought through it a little bit more. Started off with just like a course of her like helping people that already had VAs.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was like, man, we ought to just do this thing and see what happens. And so we really like soft launched it and kind of just explained it to not friends and family, but just people in our immediate network that
Yeah.
were like asking me questions all the time about VAs anyways. Because I still have a full-time job. I'm still active duty Marine Corps and we're doing all these different things. And they're like, how on earth do you have time for this? I was like, I have a
Right.
system. The system's name is Christine. It's like she
Yeah.
does all this stuff.
Wow.
And that just morphed its way into the last month and a half, 2 months. We've hired about 20 people for various different companies.
Wow.
And it's been really, really fun. So
Wow.
yeah, that's so interesting. So we recently just hired our first VA for our business and used a
Shout out to Ruby.
shout out to Ruby. But yeah, we used a company called Hire Train VA. Have you ever heard of them?
yeah, I know Val.
Okay.
Val and Adam Whitney are friends.
Okay, very cool. So that was the company we got connected with actually through Brandon Turner's Better Life podcast.
Yep.
I listened to that episode and I was like, man, sounds like a great company. We've been thinking about this. So I connected with them and we hired our VA and she's been incredible. It's really made us think outside the box of like,
Yep.
it's the who, not how. It doesn't
No.
matter that they're across the world. she had skill sets for what we needed. And it's been so interesting. It's been a good learning experience.
At no time in history prior to now have you been able, like, has the global workforce opened up to be able to access that, right? Like, we were kind of geographically bound. And then if somebody did something internationally in a business perspective, you're like, oh my gosh, you do international business, you know? And that just now it's been democratized effectively, right? And you have access through technology. And, you know, these are English speaking people in all of these different countries, and they are highly educated, and they bring creative energy that you even lack yourself. And so there's like this synergistic kind of perspective, and it really kind of challenges preconceptions you had about people in developing countries, that maybe some of the ego that you have by being born and raised in America. I mean, it's just a lot of things that get exposed when you jump into this realm. And one of the things that's been helpful for us is it's forced us to create systems we didn't otherwise have, right? So you went from being a solopreneur to now actually building a business, and that push has been invaluable. So that's crazy. So I want to bring us back here just for a second on some of the driven aspect of it. I think it's cool how you had the opportunity to kind of take what you were doing with you and your wife with Unbound, and then you kind of plugged into a bigger vision of that with Better Life. How did that opportunity come around, and did they know you? Like, what was the connection there?
Yeah, it was just again, via networking, there was something that they needed done, and I'm good buddies with Alex Felice. I don't know if you guys know Alex.
Oh,
I think you might have had him on the podcast, but
yeah, we did.
He basically reached out. They had a big data problem that they needed to like solve a couple days before they launched, and I was like, dude, I'm a data scientist. Like, why didn't you just text me first? Like I can help you.
Right.
And I didn't know anything about what they were really doing, but he reached out. I kind of solved their problem, saw that there was a need there, and I do like fractional CTO, COO work for folks, like fractional data science work. And so the values alignment of what they were doing, the need they had, that turned into like a 1.5 year long consulting engagement for me, basically, with those guys, just because they needed. Originally, it was like, guys, we need to like do some stuff. Okay, we're gonna cobble all this tech together and make it happen, but then we're gonna need to hire a CTO to really run this thing the way that they had envisioned it. And so it looked at first like me kind of holding it together with duct tape, kind of like you guys watch Game of Thrones with like the guy holding the door back. Like, door. Like that was like the first like 3 months of Better Life, basically, of like trying to make sure that the wheels stayed on the track while we got it like a full development team kind of onboarded. And then the next 1.5 years was building out the actual infrastructure. I did like the AI and machine learning on the back end of all that stuff. But
interesting.
That was just a super good values alignment. It kind of was like proving out my thesis of just find like good people that are doing stuff in the direction that you're heading. And it doesn't necessarily like, that was a huge home run for us because obviously it was anti-trafficking was at the heart of it. I was like, guys, this is exactly what we do anyways. Like, let's work together. And so that happened super organically. But long term, that's kind of my whole thesis on business in general. It's like the best way to make an impact is to make a bunch of money. Like, run a really profitable business.
Right.
Because the people that have influence are the people that can direct capital where it needs to go.
That's true.
So that's kind of my LTG's lifelong thesis is that. And our core values are community, work, and generosity. And it's like, if you have something that's really community driven and you're providing meaningful work for people inside your organization, like, you're going to be able to give in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily just philanthropy. It's like providing good jobs for folks.
Enrichment of people's lives, your employees, your end consumer, clients, customers.
And what does LTG stand for?
It's super complicated. Lindsay Tyler Goble.
Oh, okay.
It's just our initials. Yeah.
I love it. Anybody who like lacks a creative muscle, they're like, "What's the quick? We got to start an LLC like yesterday." And it's like, "What are your initials?" And you just hope it doesn't spell anything nefarious. So, and thus it was born. I want to bring kind of a lesson out for somebody listening to this. I am so fascinated by kind of retracing like the red strings that connect here and here in how you end up networking with people, right?
Yeah.
You know, you guys sought to do something. You know, your wife's mother had at the time, you didn't know if it was a legitimate or illegitimate, ministry, but it's, trying to grease the wheels of new husband. That thrust you guys into a certain direction, got you to explore generosity, and that being a pillar at really any business endeavor that you do. And that. What's wild is that unrelated, you were connected to the Better Life, and that just happened to be the same kind of mission that they were trying to solve as well through a skill set that you had and a need that they had. And I just think like when there's motion and activity and progress in your life and in your business, when you're growing as an individual and you're not stagnant, like I don't know how to say it. Stuff just happens.
Yeah, the
doors open up.
Yeah, the opportunities just come out of nowhere sometimes.
And sometimes you don't have to fret.
You're never going to have those if you're not moving forward.
Right. And so sometimes people fret. They're like, "Oh, how do I make these connections?" And it's like, it sounds counterintuitive. Don't focus on focus on doing and giving and contributing. And I remember people told me that, or you would always hear that on a podcast, and you're like, okay, but the inner drive inside of you is like, that seems to take too long, or it's intangible. But when you let go of that and you really just kind of put your head down, put your hands to the plow, doors open up that you really would have never imagined possible. And so it seems like that's been some of your guys' experiences. And now, here you are with the VA stuff and creating business models that probably 5 years ago were not on the horizon.
Yeah, and also it's so easy to sit here on a podcast and say like, just network with people, just tell people what you're doing. It's like, sure, man, I got to pay my mortgage next month. Like, I got to put food on the table. And so don't let it get lost on people who are listening right now that are like in the middle of the suck. Like, it does in fact suck. And it was 6 months before we bought a single house. You know how many 4 a.m. phone calls I got on before we had done anything?
Yeah.
Like for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And some people it's longer than 6 months. And so that stuff is like, it sounds super easy. And it's like one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Lamentations chapter 3. And that's like not a very quoted book of the Bible. It's like Lamentations, like super depressing.
Yeah.
But during like our season of like building our business, it was like, it is good for a man to like be under like the yoke. It's good for a man to like work really hard while he's young. It's also good for a man to wait on the Lord. And it's like the two juxtapositions of like working really hard, but then also waiting on the Lord to like actually provide for you in a lot of ways. It's real. It is true, in my opinion, and in my correct opinion.
Yeah. And your humble but yet correct opinion. Yes.
In my humble but correct opinion, I think the Bible had something going there. And it's like the only reason I feel like we've gotten a lot of these opportunities is because we've had our hand to the plow.
Yeah.
Like it's good for a man to put his hand to the plow when he's young. We've had our hand to the plow for like 5 years now.
Yeah.
Doing stuff. And like all these different opportunities come when you're just trying to help people. I think that's like why our fundamental core value, like if you're going to look at it like a pyramid, it's community, right? And we had core values when we first started, but they were fake. Like we didn't know what the heck we were actually about until we had gotten like
you
tested.
Googled like, hey, what 5 core values should my company have?
Exactly.
Now they mean something to you.
Yeah, now they actually mean something. And it's like, if you have to like remember what your core values are when you're telling somebody them, they're probably not your actual core values.
Right.
Yeah.
But like fundamentally, like if you're running a business, you're doing anything, I firmly believe, again, in my correct opinion, that if you put community first and you put people first, that those are the things that truly drive all the opportunity.
Yeah.
And like the worst position you can be in is being like having sales breath or like needing to close a deal to have something happen. Because
Yeah.
all of the worst things we've done have been when we had sales breath.
Out of that
Yeah.
moment, yeah.
Out of like, man, we got to buy a house now because we
Yeah.
want to make sure we keep this crew that we're working with super busy
Yeah.
because we love those guys.
Yeah.
And we like the answer is not buy a bad deal.
Right.
The answer is build a bigger funnel so that you can have more good
Yeah.
deals happening
Yes.
to you at the same time.
Dude, listen,
So-
I'm gonna re-listen
You're
to that.
preaching
like-
to us right now.
That's so
honestly.
good. Yeah,
So,
you've got our number that way. One of the things I want to comment on the giving side of things is it's important to give along the way.
Yep.
There's this kind of misnomer
Yeah.
that people have of like, when I make it, then I'll give money, or like when I get a big windfall, then I'll give.
Yep.
And just coming back into the Bible, it's like, man, there was a widow. She dropped a coin into the offering, and it's all she had. And the amount was small and minuscule. And everybody else from the outside looking in was like, she didn't give as much. And Jesus saw through that and was like, she gave more than anybody else. And the point of this is that money makes you more of who you already are. And if you're not giving along the way, if you think generosity is magically just going to like pop up in your
Yeah.
life when you're quote unquote wealthy or well established, you're kidding yourself, because there's always going to be another goal that you would justify to hold back money
Yeah,
in
right.
order to attain that.
Yeah.
And so it's like you have to give along the way when you're small, when things are tight, when you're already broke and it feels like $100 or $500 is a lot of money, because that's the discipline and the mindset that's going to be present when you have made it. And I just want to speak against that because I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in a lot of other people. It's a lie. Don't think you're going to be generous if you're not now. So
to
that's
talk
awesome.
about that, you want to know what's really dumb is giving money immediately after you flip a house when you have like 12 more on your books still happening. Right? Been there.
Right.
Like, and guess what? We ended up giving more. Amount of money we gave. This is really funny. Like the amount of money we gave was like how much money we ended up being in the hole after a couple projects, and it was like, wow, like again, super easy to sit on podcasts and like say platitudes and stuff, but I'm telling you, we've lived it, and we had been in the hole where it's like, crap, had we not given money this year, like after each sale, and sometimes more than the 10% because it was like there was a need that needed to get met, we'd be at level right now, you know.
Yeah.
But we weren't. And so I don't think that there's not a magic like thing that happens where if you give, like God is going to go ahead and just smooth.
I'm going to give that man a double portion.
Don't
Like,
fall
it
into
might
that
happen.
trap.
It sure might happen.
Right. But I'm not doing it for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like the lessons that we've learned from getting squeezed have been some of the probably best lessons in our lives. So
well, I know that, you know, somebody hopping on today didn't think they were going to come to church, but you never know when it's going to drop. And you could apply this to your life in 1,000 different ways. And I'm glad that we got into this because it really is, it is that bigger why that I think everybody has to answer at some point. Why are you doing what you're doing? There's been plenty of wealthy people that are miserable out there. So that's good, man.
All right. Let's lightning round this next segment, smaller pockets. So Tyler, this is the part of the show where you tell us about your worst real estate deal. Real estate isn't always glamorous, especially if you were a flipper. You've kind of seen the good, the bad, the ugly. So what went wrong, and then what did you learn from it so our audience can avoid the same mistake?
we were going to we needed to close a deal. We needed to keep people working.
Sales breath. This is what you're talking about.
Sales breath, seriously. And the house was zoned properly for a duplex. And so we're like, okay, great. We've got exit strategy. We could hold on to it, rent it, or we could just flip it like we usually do. But maybe we'll hold on to this one and rent it. Closed on it too fast. Didn't do a good enough walkthrough, basically. And all of the work that had been done, it was like one of those classic houses, like some of the work's been done. Like we looked at it, looked like okay.
Right.
But then you just peel back the onion and you find that's not permitted. That's all coming out. That's not permitted. That's not all coming out. Every single one of the assumptions we had made on that house for that prior work all went the wrong way. It's like usually when you go, okay, well, here's the spreadsheet. You screw this part up, but hopefully we get some other stuff right. It was like all the stuff is wrong.
Oh man.
And so that one sucks. We still have that one on our books. We're gonna probably
wow.
offload it at some point here, but it's like just turned into the project that's just not even worth fixing. And so
Right.
we just held on to it, and
It's like when you see
Yeah.
somebody put a metal roof on it, you're like, oh, bonus, metal roof. And then you realize that they did it wrong. And you're like,
Yep.
that roof now has no benefit. And you just
Mhm.
put a hole in a roof. Like, yeah.
You
no.
put 100 tiny screw holes all over the. all
Well,
over
one of the things that was crazy is the windows were mobile home windows,
Oh,
and we
Oh.
didn't catch
weird.
that. So they're
Right.
brand new windows, and we looked at them like, oh, great, new windows. And it was mobile home windows that aren't like certified for a house, and so
Yeah, they're like
stuff like
this.
that.
The window
Where's-
panes are like this thin.
Where's the
Yeah.
gelled one sticker? That's wild.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's good. Again, that urgency and desperation kind of has a dark side
Yeah.
when it causes you to not be disciplined with what your systems normally were. Because the irony is you probably knew how to do a walkthrough and the importance of doing a thorough walkthrough.
Oh yeah.
So you already had the skills and systems in place. You just didn't do them because you felt that pressure to close.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. We're going to go into our little nugget. So Tyler, this is the part of our show where you give us a practical takeaway, a piece of advice, or a fundamental principle that our investors and our listeners can apply to personal growth, business, real estate.
Yeah, I think if you are thinking that you need to hire inside of your business, look offshore first.
Mm.
And if you're starting to have that thought, you probably should have done it 3 months ago. It's like the opportunity right now to have just super skilled offshore labor, whether it's through Train Hire VA, like they're an awesome company, like Val runs an incredible company, or somebody like us, like figure out what fits for you, but then also realize that the biggest risk for that hire is actually you as the leader.
Yeah.
Wow.
In
That's good.
our experience through this stuff, it's like the VA is good. Like screening processes work to get good talent in front of the CEOs. It's whether or not that CEO is like a good leader and actually is willing to delegate tasks
Yeah.
down to their person.
Yeah, that's good.
So this is a good segue, and I don't know if it segues, so I'm just going to try it. But you guys launched an app or in the process of. Does that tie into what you guys are doing with the VA?
So that is on the Marine Corps side of stuff. As a data scientist, I do a bunch of coding and programming and stuff like that. And
Okay.
so that app was like more for a like sales tracking stuff. I work for Recruiting Command. So we do
okay,
all the
cool.
recruiting sales data basically for the Marine Corps.
So what we're learning is if you know somebody in your network that's a data scientist, they can do anything technologically related and call on them for that.
Oh my gosh. You wouldn't believe it.
So wait, and back to your, you said it was LTG Assist.
Yep.
And you guys do that and you guys outsource that service to find VAs. Do you guys have a website for that specifically, or is it on your main
all of our
website?
stuff is on ltginvestments.com.
Okay,
And there's
cool.
a tab for assist that you can kind of take a look at and
Awesome.
see what the different jobs have been. But it's seriously one of my like favorite things right now, just because it's so like I get to sit in on all the CEO interviews and like kind of help steer those things. And just like, I don't know, it's really cool the opportunities that some of these people are getting. And like we're screening the CEOs as well, and to where I know when we're placing these people, they're going to somebody who's good, like a
Yeah.
good person.
Right.
It's like going to be a great opportunity for both people. So
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's really rewarding. Well, that's kind of our last question is how can people find out more about you guys and follow your success?
yeah, come on to LinkedIn. That's kind of where I live as far as social media stuff goes. And then yeah, ltginvestments.com. It's got all the stuff that we're doing. If you're in DC, we run a meetup every month.
Nice.
And yeah, love meet people in real life. I wish we could do more of this kind of stuff in real life, but
Yeah.
technology is good.
It is. Well, Tyler, thank you so much, man, for sharing your story, being transparent, and just kind of unveiling maybe how people can be challenged to think bigger in what they're doing with their investments and their businesses. Yeah, blessings to you, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. And thanks for your flexibility. For the listeners, like I had to reschedule this thing like 75 times, and these guys were super gracious. So thank you for bearing with me on all that.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you. As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. Stay tuned every Tuesday for new episodes. And if you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, lv5capital.com, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper. We'll see you next time.